All right. Welcome to this episode of 3 by 3, the interview series where our guests choose between answering 3 questions or giving us 3 minutes of their time. Uh, this week's guest is Marc Leonardo, who's a performance apparel designer hailing from the East Coast. I'm currently up there in the Stowe Mountain area. Marc has decades of experience working with brands like Reebok and NoBull. And So here we go. Thanks for making time for us today, Marc. We pretty much appreciate it.
Yeah, this is great. I appreciate you reaching out to make this happen. This is cool. Thank
Always
you.
fun, man. It's amazing what a comment on social media can do. You've done some interesting work in your career, no doubt, and this is gonna be a fun conversation. So, uh, how do you condense a couple of decades over into an answer to one question? So, what are some of the highlights in your career that brought you to this moment in time today?
Sure. Well, I'd say the most amount of time in my career was spent at Reebok, and it was just pretty much, I'd say, for a designer, an amazing experience. And I think through that span of 20 plus years, I developed a very unique skill set. I started out when Reebok had a sports licensing division, and all that work was dedicated to the NFL, NBA, NHL. So it was, a lot of direct access to NFL teams and athletes, front office, and the leagues. So that was just, I'd say, a pretty monumental education in performance design, right down to, specifically designing for NFL athletes, team jersey systems, style guides, logos. So being in that licensed world is very unique in itself, but then learning that skill set as it developed over the course of almost 10 years that I spent time there, and then transitioned into the brand Reebok, which was kind of the umbrella brand, and worked on all of US sport, running, training, women's. Had some global teams up in the UK working on European football teams, Bolton Wanderers, CSKA back in the day, which was great. And then I slowly started to develop. I always made a joke that I was kind of a design mercenary. When Reebok was starting to develop partnerships, I always came in to lead those. So, we had a tremendous run with CrossFit, just about, I'd say, 10 years. And I came in very early and developed that with a lot of people, of course, but really the vision and strategy on what that could look like. Worked with the UFC on all the new fight kits, and along the way, did a lot of inline work. So that span of time within Reebok was my real kind of university for design. And then through that time, which though that growth pattern is, it's never lateral, it's very zigzag, and you take a couple steps back and you move forward a little bit. But I started to develop, I'd say, my own personal aesthetic as it related to my vision, and how that vision then worked to support Reebok, right? How did it support the brand? Working within Reebok, that's kind of the goal. And it was really, I'd say, focused on simplicity, really removing complexity from the process, whether it be, in the presentation, like how do we streamline presentations? How do we, uh, instead of, how do we oversimplify presentations? Designers love to just throw up images and, let's consolidate. And yeah, so it really did kind of forced myself into this way of thinking about being very minimal. And it translated very nicely then as I moved my career to NoBull. It was also in the training space and very focused in the CrossFit world. Also worked at for a little bit of time there. Was there for 2 years. We worked on the NFL Combine. So back to reaching into my experience with the NFL and understanding athlete goals and movements for the combine, which in themselves are quite complex. We say it's kind of a four-dimensional sport. Football players these days: speed, height, amplitude. So and just kept developing this aesthetic and strategy. So now I do my own consultancy work. It's under the banner of Tenet Design, and I've had a lot of through my career, a lot of reach with my network, and I've been able to work with a lot of great brands. Mostly, it seems, with startup brands, which I'm really starting to like a lot, because it really engages a different side of the design process. Right? It's at the beginning stages, so the brief stages, the concepting and ideation, and really developing a vision for your client. And that's something now that I'm really starting to find a sweet spot in. And again, I'm really leaning in more to the idea of being very minimal, um, but not that it distracts from what my client wants. And I think there's always a nuance there with designers who then become very kind of they kind of barrier themselves within a certain mindset. And I think when you're working with clients in the profession that I am with consultancy, you really got to be supportive for the visions and desires of your client. So um, but that kind of, the way of thinking, my mindset and attitude, I try to, with a lot of my experience, have that as part of the process with people that I'm supporting right now. What
Absolutely.
does that look like from design? What does that look like from your first collection? How do we build a basics collection? How do we create a little brand heat? What does that look like for development? What does that look like for materials? So that, things are, the apparel process is very complex, as a whole, right? It's designing is probably one third of the process. Two thirds of the process, I would say, is developing it and actually getting it to a consumer. So I try to put in a lot of, what I've learned, and again, reducing that complexity down to, being very specific about how to work with clients, how to help them, basically, how to give them support. That
Right.
was a lot.
I mean, I'm sure that the clients that you're finding and attracting in the way that's working is the kind of minimalist approach that you've been talking about, and what you've cultivated for yourself as a designer over the course of your career. They probably lean pretty heavily on that, and appreciate that. And it's got to be exciting for you, going from working for a large institution like Reebok to moving over to helping people launch ideas and to make a make a thought into reality. That's got to be really fun and really gratifying for you. And going from a big system to a small system is it's that's really interesting, and I imagine it'd be fun because you have all the tools that you learn in the really big setup, and now you can apply it to the small one and get something quality made for people. And with that much time in the game, you must notice some significant evolutions in what's going on with like your categories that you focus on, whether it's materials or um, well, I would think the material innovation will probably have a lot to do with what's the way that your focus evolves and stuff like that. Is that accurate? What sorry, what do you notice like is the biggest changes in like the what's available to you to do what you do?
Yeah. Um, That's a great question. I think, again, what I'm leaning into a little bit is a lot of startup brand support. And I think, honestly, those brands, startup brands, are probably making the biggest waves. You can look at running, and there's endless examples of small running brands that are just flourishing. And I think it's a mentality and it's a strategy to be very simple with your approach into the market. You're not a big brand. You can't be a big brand. You have to think small, act small, be nimble. Um, and you mentioned materials. I think for me, it's an obsession to really focus on materials as where the interest for product. Because again, if my mentality is to design very simply, and simple doesn't mean boring, and simple doesn't mean not really getting into the ideation phase and sketching endlessly. It's really about where and how to create product that I'd say, let's say, lines up back to the core values of a brand, optimizes performance and functionality. But where do you find the interest? And, you can look at t-shirts, there's a thousand different examples, but the materials are really how to specialize product. And I also see that, a real good concept for a lot of these smaller brands is to be very multi-use in their approach to thinking about a design ethos. In other words, how can we maximize performance and minimize design, right? Is there a singular t-shirt that can do, one, two, three different things, different activities? People live very dynamic lifestyles. And they're transitioning in different environments, they're staying active. Active is being at work, getting to work, riding a bike, taking a subway, commuting, going out for a run, going out for a lunchtime meeting. But for me, it's about enhancing that functional aspect of people within these lifestyles. And how can you minimize the amount of product? And you talk about a complex brand or a corporate brand, you just get into this endless cycle where you get a design brief for Q1, you get a design brief for Q2, and you have to update a great short that you just did in Q1. You're just like in this constant routine of trying to evolve something that's already great. It confuses consumers. I think it limits the excitement for designers. So what I'm trying to do is really distill that down. And materials, again, there's a lot of great mills. I had a great conversation the other day with someone that this idea of lifestyle now is like it's performance lifestyle, and I kind of shy away from words like athleisure and lifestyle as a whole, because I think you can embed this idea of being functional, having that as a narrative for the product, but really focusing in on materials. And materials are very complex. It's not a simple conversation. It's weights, it's contents, it's the region, okay? Because now we're talking about where we're going to get this developed. Colors, prints, what type of branding do you want to embroider it? Do you want to screen print it? Do you want to sublimate it? So you start getting into the complexity when you start talking about materials and material selection. I like to spend a lot of my time on materials, working with mills. And I feel that for me is where the most excitement is when you're talking about or creating product. And that all underscores the importance of good
Yeah,
storytelling
that's
too.
a very dense answer. This is kind of like sitting into a master class right now. It's intriguing and captivating for sure. And you have a directive or a philosophy of like smarter, fewer, better. We don't need more clothes, we need better ones. Um, which is interesting because you're in the business of making apparel. So how do you reconcile that philosophy with the fact that your living comes from making product? I imagine that there's plenty of room for it because that just speaks to making a really high quality garment or product that lasts for a long time. Is that kind of how that works?
Yeah, it's very multi-layered, and I think there's just the whole sustainability conversation. I think it's not a mystery to people in the fashion industry that we're very responsible for, high wastage, um, looking at microplastics. That's part of the conversation. So I think part of it is, hey, it's material selection, and I think there's a certain expectation that consumers, they're not. This is my personal opinion. They expect that in the products now, right? And I think a lot of brands go out of their way to talk about it, market it. I think it just has to be in the process. The other issue with sustainability is just a reduction of silhouettes. What is your system of wear, right? As a
Huh?
consumer, and I'm in the active space. So again, in this minimalistic mindset, and I understand it's not always easy. It's hard to create a cycling jersey that you can wear out during the
That
day.
would be that would be great.
But it's also, but yeah, it would be cool. But it's also cool maybe just to go cycling in a t-shirt. I live up in Vermont, and we do a lot of gravel riding, and I have a certain style. I don't always like to wear cycling jerseys. I like to wear what looks like a t-shirt, and I have a very cool one that I found from a brand that has a nice pocket, so I can be, I can take storage, but it's a t-shirt and has a
Oh, well
graphic on
done.
it. It looks very, yeah, and it looks amazing. And these ideas for me are really exciting. Like changing the uniform of your sport. So when I talk about, running is a great example too. I look at some of these big corporate brands, and they look like running brands, and they do a great job. They've got singlets and bright colors and sublimation, and that's not very interesting for me. I'd rather work on a smaller scale, challenge the mindset a little bit, and say, hey, what's the system of wear here, and how can we change it? Why can't we wear a performance graphic Heather t-shirt, but give it all the attributes of someone that just wants to look very subtle in their running uniform, but have it adapt to different aspects of their day. Whether it be, hey, I'm going to go out for a quick run, but I like the way this t-shirt looks and feels, and I can wear it tonight. I can wear it commuting. I can wear it at the office. I'm simplifying the process, of course, but this is the problem solving I think that I like to go through, and what I like to talk about with a lot of the clients that I'm working on is changing the uniform and really reducing the amount of product that you need. And I think that gives brands a very unique selling proposition with regards to the narrative and how they can be unique. You don't have to scatter the line plan with five different t-shirts, three different shorts, a pair of pants, and a mid layer. Like, how do we just squeeze that down into an outfit? When maybe you travel a lot, Chad, and you like to be active. I know I do. I don't want to have to three or four different active workout uniforms. I want to have one or two that look cool and simple and subtle and kind of stealthy, but still, because I'm focused on performance, it gives you all the
Absolutely,
functionality.
yeah. I mean, being able to keep it all, and speaking of travel and being able to have a versatile piece, like keep it all in the carry-on, right? And your example
Hmm.
of the cycling jersey, I think, is really interesting, and it kind of naturally moves us into the last question that I have, that I thought of. And the fact that that jersey, like that's a great example of something that's not very easy to transfer from one thing to another. I mean, when somebody is when you see a cyclist in their kit, you know that that's for cycling. But to know that there's something that looks casual, but it has a functional pocket for carrying something when you're on your gravel ride is super cool. And so, with that in mind, and thinking forward in your work and design and this type of discussion, what does the next evolution in what you're doing look like for you? Like, if you have a blank canvas and you have whatever you want to use to fill it, you can do whatever you want, build whatever you want. What is it going to be?
Ooh, that's a great question. And I would say, if I were building my own brand, right, and that's very hard to do. That's why I like working with brands who want to do it, and I can kind of support them. But if it were, my point of view and my product, I think it would really track against, this idea of product that allows functionality across the spectrum of activities. And what I mean by that, again, is, product that allows me to do my 30-minute workout in the morning with strength weights and be able to hop on my mountain bike for a quick spin, and not having to go in and change. And there's ways to do that. Now, there's some specificity with some sports, and cycling is a great example. There's a certain comfort functionality that doesn't look great in a pair of running shorts, but as it relates to again, just thinking about what the uniform would look like if you were an outsider, and I'm in the culture and community of people that ride a lot of bikes. So there's one standard look, and that doesn't change. It's tight fit spandex, and and it's not everyone out just racing. I'm not racing. I'm not a racer. I casually go out, but I do it for my health and wellness. I want to be fast. I want to be light. I want functionality. I want protection. But I don't want to look like a cyclist. I don't want to wear skinny, tight polyester spandex cycling tops. And I have a bunch. I kind of want to be the anti-cyclist. And I think there's a niche, and I think there's an opening for this mentality with brands that want to find traction on how to be able to speak to consumers like myself that are out there. Again, if it were my brand, I'm in this community of people that ride bikes, and maybe up here it's a demographic in Stowe, but there's people that want that as well. They like that, right? Like, hey, why aren't you wearing a cycling jersey? I just don't. It doesn't fit my personality for
Yeah.
performance. So again, that's kind of the way I would look at it. Same thing with running. Yeah, I feel like running and mountain biking, trail running, hiking, there's a lot of overlap there. And I feel with that overlap, the unlock is then to minimize all the different silhouettes that you might need to do very similar type of athletic movements and different environments, like how to be prepared for what you like to do at any given moment. And again, this isn't like earth-shattering science, and it's not a new way to approach it, but I'm super focused on it, and I've been fortunate now to work with clients that kind of share a very similar perspective, which really is, again, a sweet spot and a passion. So it allows me to work with brands that are kind of focused on doing that. I would love to even work with brands that want to experiment or work in this world, right? They've got this running collection and it services, the 18 to 35 demographic, but maybe there's a silo or a capsule of product that's a little bit riskier, a little unconventional, fits within the brand DNA and the values of being designed for runners by runners, whatever that might be. But they want to look different. And I think, again, this is why these smaller brands coming into the market, I think they're absolutely crushing it right now. And this is the perspective.
Absolutely. And it's when there's energy going into markets like running, for example, that's got a ton of energy in it right now. It does create that opportunity for you to be able to help them bring a super interesting vision to life and make that iterative step forward in reaching the next level of creating product and the usefulness and the functionality. That's a
Yeah, in fact,
yeah.
just real quickly, I'll give you another example. Like golf is a great example
Oh,
as
there's a
well,
good.
right? Like there was a template, a look, a feel, and then at some point, the scales tipped. It got a little bit younger, maybe, or the mentality of golf got younger. The athletes got stronger. They got slimmer. They understood the power of performance and how that enabled them to play better at their sport. But along the way, the style changed, and within this world and of golf right now, right, there's still that uniform, but you see a lot of great energy coming out of hoodies showing up on a golf course. Like that for me is about the coolest thing going, right? And that's a great example. It's a classic silhouette. It's simple, but you can make it golf. You can give it functionality. You can go out and be a daybreaker on a morning tee time when it's dewy and a little bit misty, and put a weatherproofing on your heather hoodie. And for me, that though these ideas are very intriguing as you start thinking about how to be the anti-golfer, let's say, or add a new personality to the sport, an edginess. And I think that sport right now for me is great with regards to, again, this idea of taking something from running, taking something from training and cycling and streetwear, and putting in a very performance directed sport like golf. It's
It
it's
sure is. I
exciting.
mean, bringing in like if you take something that's like a non-functional product, like let's say denim, and then but you actually figure out a way to make the denim functional so that it can be like worn on the golf course and have the I guess the mobility, give the golfer the mobility that he or she needs to make those moves. That's fun and that's innovative. And this
100%.
conversation has been really fun. So if people want to keep up with you and see what you're putting out design wise, are you on Instagram? Are you on social media? How can the people see the work that you're putting out?
Yeah, so that's the one, like, so the biggest learning curve that I've been kind of educating myself with is just like, all right, let's market myself. So I have an Instagram. It's Tenet, Tenet dot studio design, and that's my Instagram. That's just starting out. I don't have a website, but I have my work on Behance, and that's kind of an online platform that allows you to,
Oh,
kind of, let's say, visualize your
yeah,
artwork. So I
they're
do
founded in
that.
Vermont too.
They are, yeah, that's right. Yeah, which is cool. So those are really the only places right now, and again, the development process for design, it takes a long time. So I'm probably gonna hopefully soon start putting in a lot of the work that I've been that has been completed, but there's some stuff in the works right now, and obviously being very committed to my clients, it takes a little time to really put it out there. But I'd say those right now, those are the two places. LinkedIn gives a little bit of a overview on the scope of my
Well,
experience.
right on.
So and then with
Absolutely.
Malachi too, also a good place
We'll
to
tag we'll
network.
tag it all on the page when we publish this interview. Thanks a
Yeah,
lot for
great.
making time for us, Mark. This has been a great conversation and really entertaining and informative too.
That's awesome. I appreciate you making this happen, and I appreciate the
Here we
support.
go.
Thank you.
Alrighty.
Cool.
Take care.